A great solution to the common feeling that your line art looks worse than your rougher sketch is texture. When drawing something, you may be most focused on outlining each main subject, but the result will tend to look flat and plain in most styles. The detail inside of objects is often not pushed far enough, or neglected entirely. By detailing not just the outer edges of a subject, but the inside as well, you end up with something that looks much more tangible and interesting. The most common type of mark making is hatching, making sequences of usually parallel lines. It's typically taught to beginners that this is meant for shadows, but there's also a lot more that it's useful for. You can show that a surface is rough or dirty with a patch of lines, or simply that an area on an object is darker. These are things that you could also accomplish by using a darker color, but so long as you feel it suits your style, these are great opportunities to add more textured line work inside of forms. You can also use lines in a similar way for wrinkles, hair, and other similar detail. The length of the marks doesn't always need to be very long. It looks nice to have this short hatching on areas where there's an indent, like in the folds of this cloth, or on rounded plane changes, like here on this portrait. I wanted this plane shift from the front to the side of the head to look sharp, but not so sharp that it would just be a line, so short hatching works for getting a slightly softer looking transition. If you paint with semi-soft shadows on a subject, these same sort of lines can look good marking the Terminator line, the separation between light and shadow. This is because of how shadows are often a bit darker here compared to the rest of the shadow area. Circles have more specific uses compared to lines, mostly for gravelly and scaly surfaces. Typically, you want to be sure that the circles work with the perspective, like here where you see them at an angle on the path, much more oval-shaped, especially farther back and closer to the horizon line. Similar to circles is sometimes called scumbling, which I feel is a more popular thing for traditional pen or pencil drawing, but can be useful for digital drawing as well. The texture of a rough ground surface would be easier and faster to draw with these circular scribbles, since it creates the look of a lot of tiny circles, without each one needing to be drawn individually. The more you scribble, the darker the value gets, and you can potentially speed this up by duplicating and flipping the layer. Patterns and abstract details are a fun option if you want to try something more unique and bold. Texturing like this is great for getting people to want to look closely, and you can even put drawings inside of your drawings. My definitely not biased recommendation for inspiration in this area is this artist Ophelia that you can find on Instagram. If you're going for something a bit more realistic, patterns can be kept to things like props and clothing. Seams, stripes, plaid patterns, and printed on logos or lettering are all good options for getting in more line detail, as well as making character designs more interesting. I mentioned this for circles, but again, if you want the things you're drawing to feel like solid, three-dimensional forms, it's important that your line detail wraps around the form and doesn't just lay on flat. This gets easier the more you practice and develop the skill, but something to try if you're struggling is to lightly draw wireframe guidelines around your subject first. Then you can use these lines to guide how you add the detail. An issue you might run into is adding more line detail sometimes makes things look messy and confusing. In order to have both clarity and a lot of line detail, you need to be sure that the less important texture lines don't hide the lines that really matter for a viewer to understand what they see. Varying your line thickness is one easy solution, just having the most important lines be thicker so that they stand out. A trick that I use when I want to make the lines on a layer a bit more thick and prominent is just duplicating that layer. This might not work for every type of drawing brush, but probably for most. Another way to make your texture lines less distracting is making them a lighter color. Same as for changing line thickness, keeping your main lines and texture lines on separate layers makes it much easier to edit them individually. Changing the density of your line detail is one more trick. Have the most detail packed in where your focal points are, aka the places a viewer should look in order to understand the piece, and then leave other areas relatively empty. Think about what effect the way you draw has on how a drawing feels. Controlled, organized texturing tends to feel calm compared to the alternative of frantic, energetic lines that invoke emotions like anger and fear. In order to get lines like this, the speed you draw them at is what makes the difference. Drawing fast is a good way to make your lines feel fast. Here's another video with digital drawing advice if you'd like to see more. Thanks Patreon members, and thanks for watching.